morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, February 28th. And this is the AgYield War Room. I'm Dan Dempsey, and I'll be moderating today's session. If you've got any questions or comments or would like to chime in on anything we're talking about here today, please feel free to drop us a line in the chat area, and we'll get to it during the show. Quickly here, overnight markets had March corn up a half at 408 3/4. March soybeans were down a quarter at 1131, and March Chicago wheat was down 4.5, 581.5. We are now through 18 of 20 crop insurance settlements, establishing that spring crop insurance price. Right now, corn is currently at 465 3/4, and soybeans are at 1156 3/4. Pretty slow news day here, guys. Nothing on the wires in terms of export sales announcements. We will have the sales report out tomorrow, but we did have one interesting topic. We were talking about it a little bit before we came on. Cotton has been ripping the last couple of sessions. And so I think we were going to maybe show a cotton chart and talk about maybe how some of that could affect, potentially some intentions or crop rotations as we go forward into the spring here. I'll throw it over to Dustin.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So, I'd say that you look at a cotton chart, we're above 84 cents right now, and we came from 75 cents back in November. So there's one shining light for row crops is you're going to have probably some of those acres in the South certainly be taking a closer look at planting cotton over corn. And this also goes into the same discussion about the bean corn ratio, being up near 2.5 to 1 when we're at a low flat price. So when we look at a lot of balance sheets, we're also looking at the university data as well on break evens. Beans on corn is certainly a better proposition in many, many areas than corn on corn from what we see. So I think the market's on board with that now. We saw that in the USDA outlook. They lowered their acres quite a bit. But to get the more even split of corn bean acres this year would really not be that surprising at all to us. So corn closer to a 90 million or even an 89 million acreage number after perhaps some prevent plant in the Northwest or in the Northern Plains, depending on weather, that would certainly shore up some of the excess corn problem. We are finally getting to what we would consider fair carry rates as well. We have first notice day on Thursday. The last day to hold long positions to avoid risking delivery is tomorrow. And long positions include basis only contracts. It includes any buy side that's trying to protect DP corn that's already been moved, things like that. That all needs to be rolled. And I think that's why we saw quite a bit of widening here, not only in March, May, March, July, but also March D's. March D's getting down to in the 52 cent carry range. Now we're talking a pretty wide carry from old crop to new crop. As far as percentage of full carry, it's actually not too crazy. It's just we have wider carry rates than we've had prior to when we made that change in December 2019. We really haven't had a chance to test what carry rates are going to do in a decent carry out situation. We're showing a lot of signs that maybe things are getting cleaned up a little bit, that the market is getting more fairly priced. And coming out of first notice day, I still think it's going to be an interesting thing to see what happens when you no longer have that time clock of forcing the longs out of the position into first notice day.
Yeah, and to that point too, if you look at just see the March, May it's trading close to 16. 16 would be full storage, so the 8 cents a month that the exchange would charge if you actually stop a commodity or if you stop corn. So once you get to full storage, after that's just interest rate. What the the deliverer, the warehouse would be willing to give up that storage or that warehouse for a rate of return. So I think once you get past full storage, probably not worth giving up the ownership to some degree. So I think we've probably done most of the work there. You could you can obviously make it go way wider once you get into deliveries and someone decides they want to get rid of something and just bury it. You know, that can always happen. But by then, it's just the only players remaining are usually commercials. You know, there's very few number of players that'll be here after, you know, this week.
Well, it feels like two guys, I mean, you know, pretty bizarre weather the last 24 or 48 hours here for good portion of the Corn Belt. We went from setting record highs to about 17 degrees this morning, so pretty gnarly. But one thing I think that, you know, kind of caught my eye is just the farmer right now itching to get going, and by all estimations, I mean, you know, ground is being worked in a lot of areas, you know, that, and we've talked about it. If they're able to have good field conditions here in the next, you know, 3 to 5, 6 weeks, you know, they're gonna, it kind of entices them to plant corn in a lot of situations, doesn't it?
Yeah, no. I mean, you have, you know, the ground's got to be warm enough. You got to have a lot of things. Yeah. Generally, if it's a nice spring, I won't say. I mean, it's February, right? We're turning clock to March. I mean, we spent.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, I don't really see the need to go rush out March 1st and plant as much corn as possible. You know, I think, you know, maybe emotions will get to people, and it's better than looking at the markets and get out there and do what we're good at, grow corn or soybeans. But I heard some people, you know, even planting soybeans in northern Illinois, which I think is crazy this week. We can plant so fast, so I don't know, you know, I don't know why we're in such a rush all the time. Because the weather turns, you got to replan, and it gets kind of a mess. So I think that might be the talk. I don't know that a ton of people are going to go out and plant first week of March, you know, unless it's 75 degrees for extended forecast, but that's not really what it is. It was 65 for 2 days, and now it's 20. So,
right.
Yeah. Well, I would think
back to 65 this weekend. It's crazy.
Yeah.
If anything goes in beans in March, I would think, right? I think the trend over the last few years has been, if you can get beans in March, at least some, you know, if you're kind of the riskier kind of grower who doesn't mind taking a little risk and see if they can't get that 90, 100 bushel bean crop, you know, maybe they put in a little bit in March, not only depending on the weather, but kind of the forecast too, right? So if it's middle of March and the forecast looks good for the next couple of weeks, I bet you see some guys rolling, you know, in a couple of weeks here, get some beans in. But I don't know about corn. I don't think they want to. I don't think they're too nervous about getting the seed in the ground and it sitting there for a little while, as long as they know the forecast is gonna, you know, provide that weather to get that going. But they don't want to sit it, you know, they don't want to get in the ground and it sit there for weeks and weeks.
I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, you know, got planted really early. It didn't germinate for like 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, so
That's a little hairy, not seeing it come up.
Yeah, I think got shitty stands and yeah.
Well, and for, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's some dates that are set to this too, in terms of crop insurance and things like that. So it's, guys aren't going to get crazy and, you know, waive replant policies and things like that by, you know, just trying to go for the sake of going.
It's just the most exciting thing to talk about, I think. You know,
Yeah.
Market sucks, and might as well go out there and plant if we can. So I think that's more the talk than anything else. There's just nothing too exciting in our markets right now. So we're talking about cotton. I mean,
Well,
you hope you lose some
slow
acres.
news day.
You know? I mean, you hope you lose some acres somewhere, I guess. But
yeah, I will say some things about asset prices, though. I mean, like you have, you know, gold still at, you know, over $2,000 an ounce. Crude oil still $80 a barrel. You have cotton prices, obviously, that are more favorable than corn prices for a lot of these areas. You have Bitcoin, you know, again, that's more of like I don't know if you can consider that an asset worth watching for general asset prices. It's kind of more of a, you know, bubbly type fad type thing. But I think that all these things are still a symptom of the fact that we have gone through a massive increase in money supply in the last 5 years. And back to our conversations about like, what is the kind of the base case for where commodity prices should be? You know, we've historically had a lot of these conversations where people will compare tractor prices in 1970s versus the price of corn then and today. And that's not really a great comparison because yields have increased, right? If you want to compare something, it's total revenue versus total cost. Now we're talking about something that does look fairly unsustainable, not just for U.S. growers, but around the world right now, is that cost of actually planting these crops versus the yield and price they're receiving. In the U.S., it's easily in the hundreds of dollars an acre of loss right now for corn on corn. That's not sustainable. And I've had questions yesterday from one grower. Is a very legitimate question: is what's going to get growers back to profitability in a $4 corn environment? Right? What costs have to come down? Land costs, fertilizer, nitrogen, seed costs. How are those costs going to get down to profitability? We had this happen before 2015, 2016, right? Where costs had to come down dramatically. Those excess land rents had to come down. We had to make a $4 environment work again in those years. I think it's probably fair to say that is going to be a more difficult task to get these costs down in 24, 25, 26 than it would have been in 2014, 2015, 2016, given all the things that we have gone through here for money supply expansion. So I think that's just one thing to maybe take a little bit of faith and heart in for these lower prices, is that it doesn't look that sustainable, right? Demand still needs these bushels to be produced in the long run. And so I don't want to be overly bearish until we get a little better handle on how that supply and demand is going to match up here in the end.
Yeah, just to that point too, I think it's going to depend on the world grower. I think this is the situation we were in before, 15, 16, 17, is that Brazil, South America, Ukraine, Russia, right, kept growing the supply they kept expanding. And we had obviously have this ongoing Ukraine-Russian war, but they're still getting out record amounts of wheat and corn from those two countries. South America rebounded, and they're, going to still be record production even with some weather problems. So, question to that is, do we have to look at that on a global scale? Are we below cost of production for everybody? Or obviously we're generally the highest cost producer, so we feel the pain at first. The question is, South America going to cut back? Is Ukraine going to cut back? Are these other countries going to cut back? Because that's the issue. That's the sticky part, in my opinion, is do we care about the U.S. grower, especially in the short run? And by we, I meant the global grain supply and demand. I think that's 25 years ago, it didn't last very long at all, because you ran, farms out of business, and now there's someone to step in place. So it's a tricky question.
It's interesting conversation, guys. I'm sure we'll keep building on it. Rylan, we got a couple minutes here before we go into the open. What do you got on the livestock side?
Well, not much. Still pretty quiet. I mean, cattle prices are holding up pretty well. We had a little bit of a lower close yesterday in the live and the mixed close in the feeders. Just seems like we're running into a little bit of resistance here, even though the kill's picking up. Cash has been pretty slow to start. All we've seen is a little 288 dressed in Iowa right now. So kind of feels like kills are probably going to stay pretty weak, but it just feels like we're not going to grow them that much bigger at this point. So I think the market's trying to figure out how to digest that. We're still at the very, very high level. And there still seems to be a little bit of optimism, but I think everybody's cautious just because it seems like beef prices kind of stabilizing here. And if packers can get cattle cheaper, they're probably going to try to do that. So just at least at this point, last week at around 182 to 184, wouldn't be surprised to see just kind of a steady, stabilized trade. And there really isn't that much news after we kind of digested the cattle on feed report. We're just kind of sitting and waiting for the near-term factors. We'll see if there's any surprises on exports, but aside from that, there really isn't much. I think all eyes are just on cash, and we got February coming off the board here, April at a nice little premium. So hopefully we can pull some cash up, but it just feels like the market's, especially April, just running into this resistance just over 189 now. It seems like that 190 level is probably a decent chunk of sales working there, and the market just won't quite take them out yet. So we'll see how it develops, but it just feels like we're just kind of languishing for this week here.
Right. Are you starting to see some out forward LRP numbers or prices come back that look, intriguing for guys that are out forward?
Absolutely. This fall, we're starting to lock in prices, or at least we're starting to recommend going up on LRP coverage,
Okay.
even though it seems like it's expensive. But if you can get a floor around the 180 level for October, it's a pretty easy pill to swallow, I think, if that's the only kind of protection that you're going to use all year long, and just leave the upside open just in case we really get tight at some point. It just feels like the supply right now. I think there's a little bit of worry that we're going to start backing things up here come June time. So that's something to be aware of. And I think having those kind of protectionary measures below the market's really going to make a big difference for revenue. If for some reason prices, we see what happened last September, start to develop again at some point this fall.
Oh, very good. Appreciate that this morning. Just came into the open here. We got March corn up 3/4, 409. March soybeans down 1/4, 1131. And March Chicago wheat is down 6 at 580. One last administrative item here before we wrap this morning. If you call in today, be sure to wish Brian a happy birthday. He's
39.
turned 35.
65.
65.
Thanks, fellas.
Our senior consultant. Happy birthday, buddy.
I appreciate
happy
it.
birthday, my man.
Happy birthday, Brian.
He's seen $2 corn for sure.
All right.
We digress.
Yeah.
No, every day that the markets are open, we're streaming live on X, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, 8:15 Central Standard Time. We'll be back with you tomorrow. We've got export sales out tomorrow morning, so we'll go through that. If anybody needs anything, please feel free to reach out, info@agyield.com. And hope everybody has a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dave.